Somebody asked me this morning, so did you lose a bet? Which, I'm just going to take that as a compliment, I guess. Like, thank you. Thank you. Sometimes you just got to start over, you know what I mean? Like when you've done everything, you just got to get a fresh slate going. So, hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Do you ever have this thought after reading about the apostles or hearing a sermon about the disciples? Do you ever have this thought, I wish I could have been there with Jesus. I just feel like my relationship to Jesus would be so completely different if I had experienced what the disciples experienced. Have you ever had this thought? I think this every time I write a sermon, because one of my primary tasks is to connect what we read with our faith experiences. And just about every time I end up praying something like this: Lord, this would be a whole lot easier if you were just here with us. When I was a kid, it would trouble me when a pastor would ask, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? Because, did you grow up in church like that? And because I knew what it looked like to have a personal relationship with my mom or my dad or my friends at school, but when it came to a personal relationship with an invisible Jesus, what does that look like even? Well, what I've described here is the exact dilemma that the Gospel of John and the letters of John were attempting to address. Because the original audience for these writings was a community of second and third generation Christians who had grown up hearing the stories from eyewitnesses, but now all those disciples had passed on. And even though these stories that began with the words, I've seen the Lord, I've seen the Lord, even though these stories were instrumental in shaping the faith and the life of this community, they themselves had not actually seen the Lord. So how would they relate to Jesus? And it's into this dilemma of faith, one that's not very different than ours, that John's letters are written. And so listen to this passage from John's first letter. It goes like this. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and God's love is made complete in us. No one has ever seen God. Yeah, that's our dilemma too. And what's John's solution to this? Love one another. Why? Because John is convinced that the invisible God is made visible in us, is embodied in us when we love each other. That's the tangible way for us to experience Jesus in our midst. It's through each other. And John's not the only gospel to suggest this. It says it in Matthew 2. Matthew 18:20 says this, for where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am. I'm with them. So when we gather, when we love each other, we can say, I've seen the Lord. Why? Because God is love. So have you ever loved or been loved? If your answer is yes, you qualify. When we love and are loved, God's alive in us. And then, to be blunt, John also believes that the opposite is true. He says this later in chapter 4. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their sibling, whom they have seen, cannot love God, whom they have not seen. So John seems to think that our capacity to see this invisible God, this risen Christ, is somehow wrapped up in our relationship to others. If you hate someone, not only does that hatred block your view of that person who is made in the image of God, your hate directly blocks your view of God. So community isn't just like nice if you can get it, okay? Community is essential to life because it's how we have personal relationship with the risen Jesus who is life. It's through a personal relationship with one another. So one of our core practices here at Salt House is telling stories, right? And we tell stories to develop a spiritual habit of seeing where God is showing up, disguised in the events and in the characters of our life. It's a muscle we got to exercise. And like the disciples, we often don't see it. We can't see it, right? Like them, we just think that Jesus is just, I don't know, some gardener in the cemetery or somebody cooking breakfast on the beach. All these little stories in John, right? We need the storytelling of our community to spot sightings of the invisible Jesus who hides in our interactions with others. And so in just a minute, we're going to break into some small group conversations to practice telling each other stories of seeing the Lord. And all of the introverts just went, this was the morning to stay home. So even while I'm talking right now, you might have your own stories that are coming to mind, right? You might even want to ask Holy Spirit right now, hey, I am not thinking of anything. Will you remind me? Will you remind me? So allegedly, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, she'd pray this prayer with her Sisters of Charity every day before going out to care for those that no one else would care for. It went like this. Dearest Lord, may I see you today and every day in the person of your sick, and whilst nursing them, minister unto you. Though you hide yourself behind the unattractive disguise of the irritable and the exacting, the unreasonable, may I still recognize you and say, Jesus, my patient, how sweet it is to serve you. I thought this would be a great prayer for middle school teachers too. The scriptures are not inviting us to see the Lord just in those that we love, but in those that the world passes over, in those that you are not naturally attracted to or even repelled by. And I have no doubt that Mother Teresa got this way of relating to Jesus from the Gospels, probably Matthew 25:40, when Jesus says this, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers, sisters, siblings of mine who were naked, who were hungry, who were sick, who were in prison, you did it for me. You did it to me. And it's this experience of encountering Jesus in those that the world passes over that resulted in the development of hospitals, hospital systems, and orphanages, and social systems. Because followers of Jesus believed that how you treat a human being who was made in God's image is how you treat God. Full stop. Which is something American Christians need just constant reminding of, right? Including us, right here. So have you seen the Lord? Is our question this morning. In the love of the community, have you seen the Lord? Have you seen the Lord in the love of those that others pass over? Have you seen the Lord? The letter called Hebrews gives us one more category, and it's borrowed from this long Jewish tradition that God is discovered in the act of hospitality to strangers. Hebrews 13:12 says this, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. I can remember just about every big family meal that we had at my house growing up, my mom would say, that seat is reserved for Elijah. And what she meant by that was we just never know who we might meet, who might be invited to dinner, but whoever it is the Holy One with us. So has there been a time in your life that you've seen the Lord in the love of community, in the disguise of someone who needed help, or in the stranger? I love what Pastor Sarah said last week about the ending of the Gospel of John, that it intentionally, it purposely does not end. Because the story of Jesus is this never-ending story. It just goes on and on, my friend, as Jason reminded me. Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. Why? Because it continues in your story and in your story and in your story. And that's why the world doesn't have enough room for all the books, because you are the books, my friends. So now the time to share stories is here, and I'm going to cut this sermon short so that it can be continued in your stories. So just like we would during like a welcome question, will you turn to a couple people around you? Make sure that no one is left out in this who wants to be left out. And will you share your name and share a story about a time when you looked back and thought, oh, I think I've seen the Lord somehow because of the love that you experienced in a community, or because you saw the image of God in someone that others denied, or because of an encounter with a stranger that made you think, wow, maybe this is God's messenger to me. So we're going to take, a little bit more time, not too much more time. So be brief. Make sure that it's your story to tell. You're not telling someone else's story. It's your story to tell. And be brief so that you give room for everyone to share who wants to. So a couple minutes, and then after that, we'll just raise up a couple stories for the whole group to hear, okay? Ready, set, go. If you're at home, would you share your story potentially in the comments or with someone that's there with you? Or you could even just call someone and tell them your story. It's criminal to cut this short. I know this. It's criminal. But perhaps there's someone in your group that you want to lean over to and give a little nudge in the ribs to say, you should share your story right now. You should share that story right now. And then, again, that story is going to be your story to tell, and it's going to be brief so that we can give... Is that possible?
Am I supposed to go up front, or do I just stay here?
You can do it from wherever you want. Go. You can stand on that chair if you want.
I'm not going to stand on the chair. I was just telling them about when I was going to my previous church that was not queer affirming, and I was in therapy with a therapist who ended up trying to do queer conversion therapy on me after 2 years of being with her. And I was going through that season. I was walking with my dog one day, and I just heard God saying, I have something better for you. And then the first Thanksgiving Eve dance party I came to here, which was like, I'd been going here for like 2 weeks, and we were all just dancing. And God said, remember when I said I had something better for you? This is it.
Ooh. Ooh, come on. I have seen the Lord, people. I have seen the Lord. Somebody else?
All right.
Yeah, Jim.
So,
Hold on. There we
go. Over a week ago, my dog died, Josie. She was a really good dog.
Josie.
And the next morning was a Margaret Day. Margaret, our granddaughter. And anyway, so came down, and I was eating breakfast and cereal or whatever it was, and I was just crying my eyes out. And I looked over at Margaret, who has been the focus of our love so much, and it's just kind of giving to her. I looked at her, and she had this look of empathy in her eyes that just blew me away. And I was really blown away then. And then thinking about this, I really feel like through her, Jesus was looking at me.
Whoa, yeah, amen. Seen the Lord. One more? Yeah.
I don't know why I'm talking.
You are, Pam.
So this is scary for me.
Yeah, we're with you.
So my husband died in October unexpectedly. And so my neighbors came over to give their condolences. And so all the neighbors came. And then after that, one came back, and her name is Linda. And she said, I really compelled to be your friend. Wow. And I just thought, wow, you don't get that often. Yeah. So we're kind of have a great friendship right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You're courageous. You're courageous. Wow. Tim.
It was interesting because the three of us had stories about how we came out here from where we were. All three of us, how things just kind of, got in order. And mine was from Minneapolis out here. And I came out and interviewed at Faith Lutheran in Redmond. Didn't really want the job. They offered it to me. I said, okay, give me 30 days, which they were supposed to do. I kind of wanted it, didn't want it, blah, blah, blah. And I went and saw a professor at Luther Seminary. I was not a student, never had him as a professor, but I had him as an adult education teacher at the church where I was. And I told him my situation, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he goes, well, Tim, Lutherans are like a pile of manure. It's best if we spread them around. So I think you need to take that job. And I still did not take it. I still did not think about it. Then I was out mowing the lawn at our little house, and I sat down on the back stoop of our house, kitchen door right here, screen door. My wife's in the kitchen, and all of a sudden this breeze came up. It just, and all of a sudden I go, oh, wow. Dear, we're moving. And she goes, okay, fine.
Wow.
And here we are.
I thought you were going to say that you smelled manure. I have smelled the Lord. Is that the? One more. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. So I have, I'll stand up. I'm short. So I have a 12-year-old son named Ethan who might be watching at home. Hey. And shortly after he was born, I started having these heart palpitations. And, I was like, I don't know about this. We'll see. And I happened to mention it to my doctor, and she was like, that's a really big deal. And she referred me to a cardiologist, and he was like, let's do all these tests. And at this point, by the time I was having the tests, I had just started, I just left my full-time corporate marketing job to stay home as a stay-at-home mom. And we were bleeding money. We didn't have quite enough to break even, but we're like, we'll just figure it out. And my husband, who is wonderful and takes care of most of the finances because I have a squirrel brain, he was really stressed about the money aspect. And I was like, oh, it'll be fine. But I was also stressed. And then I had these heart tests. Everything was fine. And it was like the best possible outcome. And then the bill came in the mail. And it was so much money, you guys. It was so much money, even after insurance. And it was like $2,000 something. And I thought, oh no, like, how are we going to do this? And I was home when the mailman came, because it was my only interaction with single adults in the day, was the mailman. And so I opened it right away. I was worried. I prayed. I was like, God, how are we going to do this? How am I going to tell my husband? And he came home with this giant smile on his face from work. And he was like, oh my gosh, this never happens. The only time this ever happened, his boss gave him a bonus, and it was exactly $50 more than what the bill was. And I was like, God has provided this miraculous provision. And he goes like, there goes my bonus. But it worked. It was great. God showed up.
Wow. And what was the extra $50 for? I got one.
I'm going to wrap up our time by telling you a story about the song that we're going to sing next. When I was in college, I got involved with a group on campus at PLU that was not associated with PLU, but much more fundamental in their perspective on how to be a Christian. And I grew up Lutheran, and for some reason or another, I just found this so captivating and just very energetic and good. And so I jumped in with both feet into this community of fundamental Christians. And in the process of sort of doing that work together in that community, I realized there was a lot of things I didn't like about it. And one of the things that I didn't like about it is I felt like there was this forcefulness of faith. Like, you better believe. And if you don't, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen or whatever. And there's this force. Fast forward several years, I get married to Sarah, and we moved to California. In California, I started leading music at this large Lutheran church down there, and I got to meet some other people. And one of them was this guy named Dave Foster. Dave Foster is about 15 years older than me, and he just embodied this openness and this way of seeing other people that was not forced. Recently, I had a conversation with a friend, and he was asking, who were the male role models in your life that you felt impacted your understanding of how to be a male in our society? I was like, Dave Foster, because he was a soft-hearted, generous, made room for me, could see who I was type of person. And that's when I realized it wasn't so much me seeing God, it was God seeing me in the ways that I needed to be seen. I made lots of music with Dave over the 10 years, and this past weekend, he passed away to cancer. And we sing his songs here pretty regularly, actually. The first song we sang was one that he wrote, and I got to help produce an album with him. And this next song we're gonna sing is one that he wrote, and you know it very well. We sing it a lot here. And part of it is because I think Dave's spirit of generosity that he experienced from God, he just lived that out in such a tremendously generous way. And I want to invite you to receive that this morning as God saying, hey, you're here. I'm here. I have no expectations for you other than to receive the goodness that I have for you. And that's where I see God this day. Let's sing together.